Hey everybody, welcome to the Greatness Within podcast with Clifford Starks. I'm with my guest, Sandra Rojo. Sandra Rojo is the president of Journey to Authentic Living. JTAL is a professional coach, training, and consultant company. Sandra has more than 15 years of hands-on experience with clients to achieve positive lifestyle and behavioral changes. She also has a bachelor's in science in psychology, life coaching, and has extensive formal training and certifications from accredited institutes and health and wellness. So, Sandra, how are you doing today?
Hey, good to be here, Cliff. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Glad to have you on. I
Oh,
talk
thank you for the invitation.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I spoke with you for a little bit. We connected, and honestly, I feel like we're in similar fields. So I think we're going to have a wonderful interview.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned you've done motivational interviewing. What is that exactly?
Oh my gosh. Motivational interviewing, known as MI. I had a little bit of training with that. It's just a style of actually how to be asking questions to your clients. There's really a lot to it, and I have a very basic level one of motivational interviewing, but it works really well. I think even on a personal level. The creator is Miller. I forgot his first name. And basically, it's just a style of coaching. And I know that you also have training as a life coach, right? So
Yes,
we go, for some of you who are listening may not know that some of us really are bona fide coaches. We've gone through formal training, like
absolutely.
Cliff and I. And so this was just another experience that I wanted to bring into my field. And it's really trying to entice the individual, the person you're helping, to come up with their own solutions. And one thing that we do not do in motivational interviewing, for example, is many times we are well-intentioned as coaches or as parents or, whoever, people, citizens of the world, and we'll sometimes say to people, oh, Cliff, I'm really proud of you. But in motivational interviewing, this is kind of a no-no. And so basically what we would say is, for example, if we are helping another individual that actually did meet their goal for that week or within that month, instead of saying, oh, I'm really proud of you, we would say, wow, you've done such a great job. You must be really proud of yourself.
Okay.
So that kind of a language, it's kind of a different language. And I just feel that it has a really great asset to coaching, right? So
Yeah.
it's not really much different, yeah. But thanks for asking. I don't know if that's really, I can get completely speak intelligently about motivational interviewing, but I really liked it, and I'm planning to continue more my education on that.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've heard of giving people affirmations to say to themselves because it makes it more internal instead of external. So you're getting that internal reward. So it sounds something similar to that, where you're going into the wording structure is allowing them to have their own internal reward instead of getting a reward from an external source.
Definitely, and I think that this is really a great way to do that, because a lot of times we all have struggled, and sometimes periodically we struggle from maybe a lack of self-esteem or something's going on where we're really just struggling, right, to overcome
Mm-hmm.
certain challenges, and sometimes that can affect us. And so definitely I think that is a great way to do that. Another thing about motivational interviewing, and I really see this working, and if I recall the history of MI for short, it's a lot of times there are people working with the homeless, currently working, at least in California, because that's a little bit of my knowledge and training of it, with the homeless community, and going into different local communities and things like that. And so, for example, motivational interviewing isn't it's not the kind of in-your-face assertive that you would get with perhaps executive coaching, style, where you've got these SMART goals, and for those of you, SMART goals it's an acronym for, SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, and then timely. And so what that means is that, each time, somebody wants to, exercise or lose weight, then they create their own goals to meet. And in motivational interviewing, it's a little bit slower, I've noticed. So it seems to, and this is just my experience, that it would require working a little bit more with the individual who might not be motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the difference between like an executive coach or coaching with someone who is motivated. You can push them a little bit more.
Yeah.
And MI is a little bit of a slower process. And I think it was mainly designed for people actually recovering from alcohol and drug substance.
Ah, okay. Well, that sounds very interesting. That's pretty cool. And I think it is important to have different styles because people are in different places in life. And so some people, like you said,
Totally.
who aren't completely motivated may need something that's a little bit slower that's going to move them into the direction that they need to move into, and maybe they can transform and move to another level from there. So that sounds really cool. Okay.
Yeah, and it's a little bit, it was designed for therapy, although they're bringing MI to us coaches and how to apply it, and there's several books out there written about this, but it's something that you can also apply in your personal life. But it is definitely a client-centered type of style,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's just really about helping the clients to explore and resolve their sort of their ambivalence. So many times we're stuck in that, and like you said very well, Clifford, I like what you said. Motivation is, and you would know this very well, as just personally and professionally, I'm sure. We can't really motivate other people. We can inspire them. We can try to help them.
Yeah.
But we can't push them and say, "Hey, you got to lose 10 pounds by the end of the month," or something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, very true. It's I like taking an indirect approach with people because everyone is different. So you have to figure out what works for them, what makes them tick, not what makes you tick. And I say,
right.
like, if you're you can climb a mountain, but it's a lot more difficult to teach others how to climb the mountain.
That's right.
That's where,
That's right.
yeah, that's where the client experience is so huge. Like, you cannot beat client experience. And I say application over theory every day. So awesome.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely true.
Yes, 100%. And for you, and I know how much you know, especially being within the field for 15 years, was it correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And even before that, it was really, I started out with leadership, and I think that most of us, because as you and I were talking, maybe the life coaching term
Mm-hmm.
wasn't developed until not too long, or probably up until about maybe 10 years ago it became more popular. But before that, it was really quite leadership, right? Leadership skills, or,
Yes.
learning, believe it or not, even like Boy Scout, Girl Scout stuff is kind of even a type of life coaching.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I think that's where I started more I was a leader in different organizations when I lived in Europe, and so I sort of gleaned benefit from that, and then I knew that I wanted to transition into this field that we were in.
Okay, so you kind of answered my second question a little bit, because I wanted to ask what made you decide to do Journey to Authentic Living.
Yeah, wow, that's really great question.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't ask me that. I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible.
Okay.
My company was called something completely different,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you've gone through this, Cliff, but we evolve too. It's not like, years ago, I thought that this is the way it was going to be, and the website has to be this way, and you get all the details, and it's forever type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, we evolve as coaches, or any profession really that works with people. Even though we want to be consistent, we evolve as human beings as well.
Yes.
And so I was noticing, talking about motivation, I had a lot of clients, especially in Italy, and I was doing my business, I was doing coaching in a way that, to be honest with you, wasn't fitting my needs, and I felt like I was almost enabling them.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me like a couple of years to get comfortable, right, with the fact that I was evolving and growing, and that I didn't want to do coaching a certain way. And so when I ended up changing my ways of doing things, and I noticed, in other words, when I began to become more empowered and a lot more confident in the work that I do, my husband and I moved from one state to another, and then when we went to Colorado for a while, it was like I knew that I wanted to name my company something different. Journey to Authentic Living actually comes from a Greek philosophy, because I love philosophy, and it comes from a Greek term, eudaimonia.
Mm-hmm.
And eudaimonia means a lot of different things, but basically I extracted, it means basically the good life or authentic living, and that's kind of where it came about. So I know that's kind of long-winded, but I think it's important to sort of stress that. And so it's regardless of people's circumstances, right? Regardless of, whether you're wealthy or you're not, or you don't like where you live, or your age, there's always something very unique about you as an individual, and it's about bringing that out from within you, so that you don't have to follow the crowd, and you can beat to your own drum, or whatever the saying is.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of those interesting things that I do talk about sometimes with when you're dealing with an individual and finding that correct balance to where you're not enabling them and you are empowering them. And it takes time. You can't learn how to do something like that on one try. It reminds me of riding a bike. You're going to fall, you're going to crash, you're going to burn, but you learn from those experiences. And what I do love about even saying the authentic living, you're honest within your experiences. Like, I've had clients that I've had for over 10 years. And through the process, I have continued to grow through the process and learn and mature. And I'm okay with saying, yeah, I've made mistakes in life. And it's getting a little bit scary, because now it's almost like the second someone makes a mistake, they can hold you under their thumb with it. And the only way a person can really do that is if you allow them to do it, instead of just saying like, yeah, I made a mistake and I'm going to get better. I'm going to improve. And so respect on your journey and your continued journey, because it's like you're never, the only thing that's guaranteed is there are no guarantees. Everything's constantly changing. Everything's constantly moving. And you're either learning and you're living, or you're not.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree. I mean, it's well put. And I think it's important these days with and it's really interesting, because today I just posted something that you commented on the Instagram, and of course by the time this recording is, it's not important what the post was, but it was about my family, and it was about how diverse we are, not just in race, but also in our ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And this has been so important, and not that I took it for granted, I've always been grateful, but I think when I went outside of my world, and where I was kind of making mistakes, and I thought, well, family, it's not often where you can find families that can also, forgive your mistakes as you're talking about or whatever, but try to work through them.
Mm-hmm.
And why I'm sort of connecting these two is because I think it has a lot to do with tolerance as well, because we do make mistakes, and you're right. It's we're not going to stop making mistakes, or we're going to perhaps make a poor choice or say something maybe that was taken out of context. So I think it is important to be aware of that. And the hope is that what you're doing in your work, because it sounds like you're doing a lot of really great work with the people that are encountering you,
Mm-hmm.
is they can see that, right? It's really looking at, walking the talk. And that for me is extremely important. I'd rather be transparent, of
Yeah.
course, with dignity and respect, because
Yeah.
I don't believe, sometimes we hear men and women, especially sometimes I hear it in women, something to the effect, like I'll be reading something and it's very caustic in my point of view. It's like, well, I'm just going to say this because. And one of the things I learned is that, but you got to be also aware that just because you can say something, or just because doesn't mean, we have to learn to be forgiving, I think, of each other. And when somebody does say, I'm sorry, and then just try to see if that person is going to, how should we say, meet up to that standard.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, how about you? Do you find, in your environment, do you find that it's less tolerant when you feel like you do make a mistake, or you might say something that might be taken out of context?
Honestly, I get along really well with everyone. It's been a tailored gift though. It wasn't always that way. The biggest thing is what I go with is to each their own. One, but with that being said, it's kind of like, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. And so my way of putting it is, I say we have our spiritual self and we have our flesh. And our spiritual self is like us living at our highest being, seeing the greatness in every individual. Like even my greatness within, it shows that there is greatness in every individual that I meet. Everyone has a special story that they can tell. And with that being said, I say I do have the flesh, where the flesh can be negatively judgmental. The flesh can get angry. The flesh, it can do all of these things, and it can say something's right or something's wrong. It does do those things. Like, some people can irritate me. Some people can frustrate me. But I always go into both areas. Like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, I shouldn't judge that person. If I'm judging them, I'm going to judge them. But at the same time, my spirit still sees the greatness in them.
Yes.
And when you can put those together.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that, because we also live, we say that we don't judge. People like to say, well, I don't judge.
Mm-hmm.
And judgment is different, I think, than being critical, or that, and in its shadow, they're both not beneficial. They're not a beneficial thing. But I think that when we bring to light something, I think you and I are the kinds of, from what I gather of your work and talking to you personally now several times, is that, one thing that we have in common, you and I, is that we really see the potential in each human being regardless.
Yeah.
And, like you said, the greatness. And I have high standards for myself, and I also actually have high standards for other people.
Yeah.
But those of you listening, don't be like, oh my God, she has all these expectations. It's not really an expectation in the sense of, again, the shadow part of it. It's like saying, I know that you're better than that. I know that you can really bring the best version of yourself out.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean minus the process and the time it will take, but that someone can hold that space for you while you're coming into your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I say, I use it in a workout analogy sometimes, where if someone can only do 5 push-ups and maybe another person can do 100 push-ups, you're not going to judge that person for being able to only do 5 push-ups. but you can explain to them that they can move, they can grow, and they can get stronger. And sometimes the best way to do that is by getting stronger yourself. Like if you stand for a certain thing, it's very funny. They say the Dalai Lama specifically, be the change, and that comes from when you do the things that you need to do, other people will follow suit on what they're doing in their life, and do the right things that they need to do because you're doing right by not only yourself but by others.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and do you see that that's happening though? And especially, we can only speak for our country, but
Mm-hmm.
but do you actually see that people want the better, or do you think it's more entitled or entitlement?
I think the media can make it very toxic very quickly, and so um, when we see something, we think that's how it is everywhere, but at the same time, your reality is a direct reflection of how you treat other people.
Yeah,
So it can change really, really
yeah,
quick. Like I've
it
seen,
can.
yeah, I've seen people like this is happening and this is happening, and then if you have to empathize with them, you have to understand them first, of course, but listen in and listen closely, and then ask them a couple questions, and they'll see it a little bit differently. Because I think people, they are inherently good and they're inherently evil. They're both, and
Mm-hmm.
we are circumstantial, environmental. Like there's so many
Totally.
things that go into it, and
Yep.
so many variables.
Yep.
And
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
we're very, very layered. And the cool thing about social media is now we're starting to see that more than ever. And now people, instead of like, oh, this person did this wrong thing, it's like, okay, well, why did they do the wrong thing? Let's question as a human being, not as a judgment of I'm better than such and such. And I think that kind of speaks volumes on what you were even talking about, saying like you're going to be your best, and you know people can be better, but it's not to say, oh, you can be better, you're messing up. It's to say, well, look at it this way, and imagine how you would feel when you do things better. Imagine how you would feel, because that's what I go off of, the emotion and the feeling of people being their best. People love that feeling. It's addictive when they do the right things for themselves and for their environment and for the people they care about. Like there's nothing better than that. And sometimes we get away from that because we're bombarded with toxicity, and we forget. And it's like, oh, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad. And it's not to deny that certain things do need fixing. They absolutely do. But it's to say, well, how are we going to fix it instead of complain about it?
Well, and I think that that's part of that. When I asked you that question
Mm-hmm.
deliberately about the self entitlement thing,
Yeah.
is having been in the business and a behavioral coach like myself. I'm curious like you are, and I'm sure you've been that way since you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's really important, more than ever. I think it's important to teach all people because, again, it doesn't matter what age group. But I am seeing a lot of people almost it digressing in a way, right? And I'm speaking outside of television as well. You know, we're
Yeah.
seeing it. Like you said, people forget.
Yeah.
But I also think that at the same time, this is that contradiction. This is that what we were talking about even before. You know, there are times where it is black and white, and I think when it comes to personal development and growing, it is a little bit black and white because you have to take the bull by its horns. One day, you just have to take responsibility. And I also agree that there are layers of people of within ourselves. There are layers, and we are for the most part multidimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are, you know, conditioned by our society, by our environment, by our family. But you know, we learn even without people like literally teaching us like a teacher. I mean, we learn by watching people. And so one of the interesting things that I'm really diving into a lot more, and I've been successful with it, and of course, it's not a new thing, but I think a lot of us now are really understanding that that it really is about perception, and that we do have to challenge our belief system. Many times we think, well, this is that way, or, all men, or all women, or all, and you're going like, no, as soon as I start hearing the all, that's a red flag for me. It tells me that, there are some people, there's good and bad, and like you said, inherently, I think you use the word evil and good in all of us. And so it's just, again, it's embracing a philosophy that says, I want to truly understand where you're coming from, even though I might not agree with you, maybe what you're saying, but you know what? Maybe I can learn from you. Or guess what? Maybe you've got a piece of information that might shock me into actually considering that my limited belief or whatever is perhaps needs an upgrade, And as human beings, I think that we have this tendency to be we identify so much with what we believe, but we're finding out, like what's happening, I think, in our country is actually, I'm looking at it from a very high perspective. So for those of you listening, I think actually it's about time that it's a very uncomfortable time to live in, but it's also an extremely freeing time because things are coming out that were hidden, right? So if we want to bring light to something, we have to the darkness, right? We've got to turn on the light bulb. And so we're seeing things, and we're seeing behaviors, and we're seeing self-righteousness, and we're seeing people that think that they're above the law. We're seeing all kinds of interesting things. And it's an opportunity to really be able to, in my opinion, to really come out authentically, to really say, wow, now I don't have an excuse to be a victim of my whatever. I can really become empowered because I've got people like Cliff, and I've got, YouTube videos that I can watch, and and so I think we live, believe it or not, in my, of course, I see the silver lining and things, but I look at it as a very exhilarating time for personal development.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been the type that says the opportunities are in the obstacles. So obstacles only help you grow if you allow them to. So any tough time, any toxic time, any difficult time, you can find something to learn and to grow because of that. And the biggest thing is having the right people on your side to see it as such and remind you of such things too. Because if you're not given a reminder, you can shrink into fear and doubt and distrust. And that's a dangerous place to be. I say you can't get rid of darkness with more darkness. You have to enlighten people. And
that's a really good point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is really important. Let's see how I can say this. First of all, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think we both are definitely on the same page with that. And what I am finding is that we need a diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Because diversity isn't color or age. Diversity is when you can, a lot of people, very intelligent, educated people that I know, and I realize and I admit I can kind of look back, I like talking about this because a lot of intelligent, educated people I know, very smart people, as we all are, we're all human beings. So, because some people might, when they're hearing me right now, might come to the conclusion, well, they're ignorant or they don't know. But no, it doesn't matter. All of life is that one of the ways to achieve what you're talking about, Cliff, to bring light to that darkness, to have people around us. The thing about it is, this is exactly what I'm trying to promote with Journey to Authentic Living is socialize or get to know or have dialogue with people that think differently than you. Because the only way we're going to bridge the real dangerous diversity is by being able to sit down and talk, if you will, to have a round table to say, that's interesting. I wonder why you think about that or what you think about that. And well, what about this and what about that? And too often we find all kinds of people, like I said, even educated people, that are inclined to hang out with people that only think like they do. So in the end, we have what we call in psychology confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to only hang out and think, politically and religiously and culturally and food-wise and, and say these stereotypes, I'm only going to hang out with people like that, well, then how am I going to not only reach people outside of that schema, but how am I going to really bring in tolerance and peace, and how am I going to grow when I'm only hanging out with the people that confirm to me more rooted that my beliefs are correct? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's
yeah.
It's funny how it can work that way sometimes. Especially, we can become so focused on our bias that we will specifically watch things that confirm our specific bias as well, and listen to things that confirm our specific bias. And
then we feel that we're better.
Yeah, I'll give a perfect example. We look at statistics, and you can look at a statistic and say, this is the statistic and this is why this is right. And that could be true. There could be truth in that. But at the same time, you're dealing with emotional human beings. And if you're trying to get a statistic across to someone, telling them statistics in an emotional state probably isn't the best way to convince them.
Amen.
Yeah, that's how we try and do it.
I totally agree
with
that. Yeah, because we have to connect. And it's really interesting that you're bringing up statistics, too, because I'd like to think of myself, and I've been told by others that I can use my left and right brain.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's interesting about that, I did a podcast not too long ago, really about, I have friends that are vegans, and I have friends that are paleo or anything in between, right, that they eat differently and
mm-hmm.
stuff. And what I noticed is that the podcast was really directed to people who feel the pressure, peer pressure or pressure from society to eat a certain way and to not eat this way. And, to be honest with you, I find that kind of sad because somebody like myself who has studied nutrition, of course that's not my niche area, but I did study it. I learned a lot
mm-hmm.
about bodies and about how maybe you can tolerate more simple carbohydrates than I can.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm lactose intolerant. Maybe my body needs animal protein. Maybe yours doesn't. And I'm hoping that and even in that field, as you can see from Facebook and probably Instagram, people can be very judgmental. It's like, well, if you eat this way, then you're whatever.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. It's like, you can get those confirmation biases. I can give a compelling argument with stats and information and research on why to go vegan, but I can also tell you why you should also go paleo.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I'll tell you right now, I've probably converted more meat eaters to vegans than some vegans who they'll try and force it down your throat. And I'm not even a vegan. I'm not even a vegan. But I will present the arguments and explain the arguments on both sides, and then allow you to make a decision from there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
because you'll see people who will try and force veganism down someone's throat, and it's so bad it makes them almost want to eat even more meat, right in front of them. Well, now I'm going to eat 3 times as many cows. It's just wow. It's turned into this major insane argument. And honestly, that's one thing that I did learn from, I'm 37 now. When I was 21, 22, I got out of school, out of ASU, And I'm like, I'm going to change the world, and this is how I'm going to do it, and I have a whole plan. And I marched out, and I learned really quickly how it's not difficult, but there is a flow there. And I had to learn how to flow. And when you flow, people get to places much faster. And they get there when they need to get there, not when you need them to get there. Because one thing I was really good at was I could transform a person and I could do it quickly. But I realized you can actually move a person too quick through the steps. And when you're moving them through those steps so quickly, they might revert back to what they were because it was forced upon them instead of letting it be flow into it. And now that I'm older, people flow into where they need to go into and maintain it, and they maintain it with ease. It really isn't that difficult. It becomes difficult when we force things into things, though. And that is part of the learning process.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I can't argue with that. This is, it's really remarkable that we do have so much in common. And then in regards to that, because I also have personal experience with trying to, well, back then it wasn't called veganism, but it was being a vegetarian. And I was on the macrobiotic way of eating. For some of you that know, it's more of a, I think it's actually Japanese in its origin. And I was also cycling a lot. I started when I was about 22, 23 years old, and I was living in Italy at the time, and I was cycling quite a bit, and I was also completely meatless or any animal product whatsoever. And I tried doing that for several years, and I kept on getting ill. And I couldn't digest legumes very well and things like that. And so I learned I had to go into the hospital a couple of times. And the great thing is that my friends who were on the macrobiotic way of lifestyle, they were extremely supportive of me. And I just remember them saying, Sandra, it's really okay. Some people's bodies are just very different. And I just remember my friend Roberto one time told me, he said, your body probably needs animal protein. And because I was constantly anemic, and no matter what other sources of protein I was trying to ingest, it just didn't work. That's the bottom line. And so I have literally physical experience that I just could not move into that lifestyle. Yeah. And it's okay. And so I'm not just speaking from the, because of what I'm observing. I wanted to do this podcast, and actually a couple of people I've known that were vegans stopped actually communicating with me because they found it very provocative. But then I have some other vegan friends who have known me for so long, and they're like you and I, they understand nutrition, they understand the body. And so, but their reasons aren't like political reasons or environment. They just chose to have a vegan, eating it the vegan way, but they do it in such a way where it is good for them. Because not all vegans, by the way, or not even meat eaters, they're not necessarily getting the nutrients and nourishing their body. And I don't know if maybe that's something you've experienced as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's people are complicated. They are.
Yeah.
And with that, it's kind of like figuring out how to come up with the right solutions for each individual, because you will have some people who they'll say you're wrong in what you're doing, and they have no evidence to back it up but their feelings, but their emotions. And if you're willing to guide them and explain it to them, but some people just don't want to be guided. They don't want it explained to them. And I go, that's fine. When you do want to listen to me, I'm here. Like that's kind of how I live life. I do things on my own terms, and at the same time I'm consistently educating myself and I will take the time to empathize with an individual and understand the individual the best that I can. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I've had so many wonderful relationships. I mean, I really love people, and people are great. I really believe they are. And I believe sometimes they can get in their own way. Some people can get in their own way. And that's okay. You know, that's okay. Myself included, I can get in my own way. We all have our own blind spots. And it comes down to just continually moving and growing and adapting and figuring yourself out and figuring others out and doing your best to move as many people in the direction that they need to move into. And I'll say, they say the stars shine brightest in the darkness. The stars shine
Yeah.
brightest in the darkness. So if you want to shine, expect darkness to be around. So darkness isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's you're going to have haters, you're going to have people who live in dogma, you're going to have people who are going to try and discredit you even when you should have full credit. It is what it is. But if you stick with your truth, and your truth is understanding and learning and adapting and growing, that's yeah, and you stick by that. You don't follow suit because a group is telling you to follow suit. And I think that's where it can get kind of dangerous. People will create dogmas and say, like you said, you have friends who disowned you as a friend for making a choice. For making a choice. And that can get a little bit scary. And that's okay. Like, you just like, all right, you know what? I have to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way. And you can believe what you want to believe. But the truth of the matter is, it's almost as crazy. It really is when you simplify it and say, I like strawberries and another person likes cantaloupe, and I can't be this friend because they like cantaloupe and I like strawberries. You know,
Yeah.
like, you're just like, I can't. And you'll see it. You will see things like that. And
Well, and I think that in a way, I've learned to almost, like you said too in the beginning, is just take these. Before I used to take it obviously very personally,
mm-hmm.
but it's really not a reflection. I know we hear that all the time when people say, "Well, it's not a reflection of you,"
Yeah.
but it really isn't. It's a reflection of their intolerance, whether it's cantaloupe or whether it's whatever it is. Like you were
Mm-hmm.
saying, it's just they're inside of themselves. There's something that feels unsafe for them, and they feel threatened if you don't agree or you don't embrace.
Yeah.
If you don't think like they do, people get they feel threatened, and I don't. It sounds like you and I are not. I'm not emotional
Yeah.
about what political party you may vote for, or whether or not you travel a lot or you eat cantaloupe versus strawberries. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm interested in you, and I'm interested in how to help you become the best version of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't believe in this, that one thing is better than the other. I think that there's room for everything, and I think that reasoning and logic are extremely important in these cases over emotion.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I simply put either a person's in the light or they're in the darkness. And I don't look at that as even necessarily a bad or a good thing. It's I like living within the light though. I live in the light. And if people want to live in the light, I explain what living in the light is. If they choose to live in the darkness, that's their choice. If they want to live in the light, they know where to find me. And that's kind of where I stand on things. And honestly, the light and the darkness, they in a way need each other. You look at the yin and the yang.
Totally.
Yeah, you look at the yin and the yang, and it's like if everything was light, then would we even know what light is anymore? Light is seen best in the darkness. So they in their own way do feed on each other. Both is a necessity. And that's where I look and say, all right, here I like to make people think and say, all right, well, if it was this way, if we had this perfect utopia, would we know we were in a perfect utopia?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where you empathize, you understand people, and you understand why they think the way that they think. And honestly, like, for all the years I've been training and working with people, it's fascinating me because not only do they learn from me, I learn from them. Yes, I am the professional, but as a professional, a true professional, I still learn from them because I say to myself, I can get a little bit better each day. I can be a little bit sharper each day. I can move a little bit more each day. And I'm learning a ton from even my 2-year-old son. 2 years old.
Yeah.
2 years old. He sees the world in a way adults don't even see the world. It's crazy. It's craziness. And it's the coolest thing to watch.
Sure. Yeah, children really do really entice that, don't they? That kind of, because we forget how to be kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes we take things too seriously, and we're just so wrapped up in just in general, you know, people and their dogma, and so children are not.
Yes, absolutely. They are so good with the go with the flow type attitude, and they appreciate the moments that they're given, and they allow you to be what you are. Like, just off of what you were talking about people having a reflection, it's a reflection on them. Like, don't personalize it. And I tell people it is hard not to personalize things. Like, that's hard because they're doing it directly to you, so it feels a little personal. But it's their conditionings. So each person has their own conditionings. And when you have your conditionings, you're going to see within your conditionings, not within someone else's conditionings. That's something that has to be trained. But we're not taught to train that.
Yeah, we're not taught for sure. I mean, nobody's born with that manual, and I think that you and I are achieving that and trying to achieve that. I know with my clients, many of them have really had a mindset shift, you know, because it is once you explain to them, I myself, you know, it took me a long time. I mean, I was also a practicing Buddhist for many years and studying a lot and really trying to understand these concepts, you know, that just seem so far out abstract, and really just trying to apply it in everyday life. And, you know, I think what we're talking about right now is, yeah, I mean, I kind of like what you say, not kind of, I like what you say, it's about the stars shine the most when there's darkness. And I think perhaps maybe you and I could be kind of considered that in the sense, not that we're like movie stars, not like that, but like in the fact that we are standing in our own integrity and dignity. You know, there were a lot of different organizations that I was involved in. There were a lot of movements, if you will, if we want to call them that, in a spiritual realm that I was involved with, and I realized that the more I did my trainings, and I did, you know, I'm also a shamanic practitioner, so I have that integrative alternative side to my work. But what I discovered too within this kind of, not within the shamanism necessarily, but just in this kind of spiritual realm, is that I really was looking at things very differently. And so I wanted to pull myself out of that and say, no, I don't want to enable people. You know, I don't want to just pat them on the back, and, you know, and it sounds like you're the same way too, is that you want to empower people, you want to help them overcome many different challenges.
Yes, big time.
And so, yeah, so we have to be unique in our own way, and I think that that's what distinguishes us in our work, is being able to really empathize and that's where that no excuse kind of comes in. Yes, it's true, you've been a victim, we all have. Yes, it's true, I can cry with you or laugh with you, and totally, and we need to really acknowledge that, and there's a time and place, and we need to hold that space. Yet there's a time and place also for ultimate forgiveness, and also to really see what's inside of us because of that reflection. And I don't know, this might be a little bit thought provoking maybe to some of your audience, and I deal with a lot of people, who come my way, kind of part of what I have a lot of people that are really struggling with trying to understand that taking responsibility for their actions and their choices, and that and to be able to see through their process, and of course it does take time. It is a lifelong process. Come out of that, and at least in your field, it sounds like people are. I don't know. Are they less challenged? Maybe I'm making an assumption here. Do you find them to be less challenged? You think? You think it's easy to motivate people and have them just go from A to B like within a matter of weeks?
Most of them, yes, just because mine's organic search. So since I'm organically sought after, they're already in the process. Now, when I do find someone who hasn't really experienced anything of that nature, like self-development, it is a different world. But I will say it doesn't take a person that long. Like, that's the funny thing of it. Like, a year is not a long time. It really isn't. And people will look at a year and be like, 365 days? Seriously? And I'm like, well, what did you do last year? Like, they make it sound like it's forever, and because they've been conditioned to believe that. They've been conditioned to believe that doing something that they don't want to do in the short run will make their long run better. So they say it takes too long. But I've never had anyone who's gotten there ever complain and say, Cliff, I wish you wouldn't have done that for me.
Yeah, and I deal a lot with my niche area is behavior. So it's and there's been a lot of studies, and because I kept on coming to an impasse in my own work, and of course you and I are both lifelong learners, and so we have to constantly be studying and constantly be looking at what's going on. But definitely it's the whole makeup, if you will, of an individual. And so it's not change. I mean, it's known that change is the most difficult or behavior, is the most difficult to change. I mean, it's just kind of part of it, but that doesn't mean it's insurmountable or anything like that. So, but yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we're taught that behavior is concrete, like that it is what it is, and you're stuck with that. But that's not necessarily true by any means. And
it's called neuroplasticity.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. What makes it so interesting is if you take a small thing, like do like little small steps here and there. It's about creating habits. And what people try and do is they try and beat a habit into themselves. Like, that's why they say, like, it takes 21 days to create a habit. Like, not really. It takes a moment, but it's a lot of little moments consistently. It's not going to be 21 days and all of a sudden, and I've built the habit. Like, I could give anyone something to do for 21 days and tell them, you'll get $1 million if you do this for 21 days. Yeah, they'll do it for that 21 days and then stop doing it. It won't be a habit. A habit is something you do by nature. Like, it becomes your new nature. And this is speaking from being a fat kid. Like, I used to like my cakes, my pies, my sugary foods, my sugary drinks, and I would have them consistently. And then I made a switch. I changed my habits. And it didn't happen in 21 days. It wasn't like, oh, now I got it figured out. Like, no, it was a process. But now, could I convert back to it? I absolutely could. But this is the new habit that I've created. I like eating cleaner. I have my sugary foods on my occasional times when I want to have them. and I'm perfectly fine with
Yeah.
that. I created a different balance. I have created a different balance. And that's the same thing with when a person is trying to create a habit. It takes some time. It does. But when you
Well, it
do it,
really does.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you do it, it becomes a new part of what you are, behaviors included.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of, people who want quick, fast, and what I call even fast food spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And having been in, as a leader in spiritual movements, it is interesting to see that, and it is a process, and it is extremely rewarding. I mean, it's just, I think sometimes people might have, this notion that they're arriving, like the old adage says, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's very true. So again, it's a belief, that says, I'll arrive at some place, or I'm going to be, of a certain whatever, and I have no more to grow or to learn or what have you,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting finding that combination, and we talked about it a little bit, of happiness and success. And I say success is external, where happiness is internal. And I think sometimes people look at, when I get to my success, I'm going to be happy. And it doesn't work that way. The success is just a drive, like it's something you drive towards. And when you drive towards it, you just go find another destination after that destination. But you're always internally happy within. You're happy within the process.
Yeah, definitely.
So it has been an absolute blast. And I want to ask you, Sandra, do you have any final thoughts before we end this podcast?
Boy, I don't know. I feel it was a really great discussion. I'm really honored, honestly, to connect with you, and I not really just encouraging all of you that are listening to live authentically, to discover what that is for you as an individual, and that would be about it.
Awesome. So Sandra says, continue to live authentically. I'm going to leave her information in the comments below. So if you liked what you heard, definitely check her out. Got a lot of love for her. She's a sweetheart. And we've probably had about 5-6 conversations already. And, if you have anything specifically for her, please give her a shout out.
Yeah, please do. And I look forward to having you on my show too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sandra. It's been a pleasure. And you have a great day.
Same here. Thank you so much, Cliff.